What if the voice in your head that just reacted to that title, the one that perhaps said, yes, I need to hear this, or maybe I already know this, what if that voice is the very thing we need to look at today? Let us begin there, because it is the most direct entry point into everything I want to share with you. There is a voice in your head. It is speaking almost constantly. It comments on what is happening. It judges. It compares. It complains. It plans. It remembers. It worries. And most human beings are so identified with this voice, so completely fused with this stream of thinking, that they don't even know it's there. They think it is them. They think, I am the one thinking these thoughts, and therefore I am my thoughts. This right here is the beginning of what I call the ego, and it is also the beginning of most human suffering. So today we're going to look closely, not intellectually, not as a concept to store away in memory, but as a direct seeing at the difference between the ego and who you really are. Because this is not a small question. This may be the most important question a human being can ask. Everything else, your relationships, your work, your health, your sense of peace or its absence, flows from whether you are living from ego or from your true nature. Let's start simply. What is the ego? The ego is not, as many people think, simply being selfish or having a big ego in the way we casually use that phrase, being arrogant, boastful, self-important. That is only one expression of it, and often the most visible one, but the ego runs much deeper than that and much more quietly. The ego, as I use the word, is a mental construct. It is a sense of self that is built entirely out of thought, out of memory, out of roles, out of labels, out of comparison, out of the stories you tell about who you are. It is not a thing, exactly. It is more like an activity, a continuous, largely unconscious process of self-definition through thought. Notice, when you say, I am, and then you add something after it, I am a father, I am successful, I am a failure, I am a Democrat, I am Christian, I am not good enough, I am better than him. Every one of these is the ego constructing an identity. Some of these identities feel good, some feel bad, but notice they are all mental. They are all concepts superimposed onto the simple prior fact of being. Before you had a name, before you had opinions, before you had a nationality or a career or a history of successes and failures, you already existed. That existing, that simple sense of I am, prior to any content added to it that is close to what I would call your true nature. Everything added on top of that, all the labels, all the stories, that is the ego. Now, why does the ego exist at all? Why does the mind do this? Partly, it is a survival mechanism gone slightly out of its proper place. The mind evolved to help the physical organism survive, to solve problems, to remember danger, to plan ahead. This is useful. Thinking, used properly, is one of the most powerful tools available to a human being. The problem is not thought itself. The problem is unconsciousness, that is, complete identification with thought, so that you no longer know yourself as anything other than the thinker. When this happens, the mind, instead of being a tool you use, becomes something that uses you. It runs on its own, compulsively. and you believe every thought that arises, as though the thought itself were reality, were truth, were you. Here is a simple way to test this in your own experience. Think of a time recently when you felt offended, hurt, or angry because of something someone said to you. Now ask, what actually happened? Someone made some sounds, words, or perhaps wrote some words in a text message, sound waves, or shapes on a screen. That is the raw event. Everything else, the sense of being attacked, the feeling of injustice, the inner story of how dare they, I don't deserve this proves they don't respect me, all of that is added by thought. And notice something remarkable. That story, once triggered, doesn't just sit there quietly, it generates emotion. It generates a felt sense in the body, tightness, heat, a certain heaviness or agitation. This is what I call the pain body being activated, an accumulation of old emotional pain carried in the body that the ego actually feeds on, that it uses to strengthen its own sense of separate existence. The ego does not only think, it feels, and often it feeds on negative feeling to sustain its sense of I. This is one of the strangest and most important things to see about the ego. It does not want to be at peace. Peace does not strengthen it. Peace, in fact, threatens it because the ego's sense of self depends on contrast, on conflict, on being right and someone else being wrong, on having enemies, on having grievances, on comparing itself favorably or unfavorably to others. Have you noticed how the mind loves to replay an old argument, rehearsing what you should have said, keeping the sense of injury alive? Why would it do this, if not for some strange psychological gain? The gain is this: as long as there is a story of me being wronged, there is a strong, vivid sense of me. The ego mistakes this vividness for aliveness, but it is not aliveness. It is a kind of psychological static, a noise that drowns out your actual presence. So now let us turn to the other side of this. If the ego is this constructed, thought-based, story-dependent sense of self, then what is the true self? The true self is not a better story. It is not I am now enlightened, or I am spiritual, or I am at peace as a new identity to replace the old one. Because notice, even that would still be thought, still be the ego wearing a different costume, a subtler, more sophisticated one. Spiritual egos are very common and very tricky because they disguise themselves in the language of awakening while doing the very same thing the ordinary ego does, seeking specialness, seeking to be more than, seeking identity through comparison. I am more conscious than you is still the ego talking. No, the true self is not a thought at all. It is not a concept. It is not something you can arrive at by thinking harder or by collecting the right spiritual ideas. The true self is what is aware of thought. It is the space in which thoughts, feelings, sensations, and experiences arise and pass. It is prior to all content. It is what remains when thought, even briefly, goes quiet. Have you ever had a moment, perhaps looking at a sunset, perhaps holding a sleeping child, perhaps simply staring out a window on a quiet morning, when, for a few seconds, the mind went silent? No commentary, no analysis, just direct perception, direct presence. In that moment, did you feel that something was missing? Very often, people report the opposite, a sense of deep peace, of fullness, of being fully alive, even though nothing was happening in the mental sense. This is a glimpse, just a glimpse of your true nature underneath the noise of ego. It was there before the sunset triggered it, and it remains after the moment of appreciation fades and the mind starts talking again. It is always available prior to and independent of any external trigger. You do not need a beautiful sunset to access it. You need only to withdraw your total identification from the next thought that arises. This is why I speak so much of the present moment, of the now, because the ego cannot survive in its usual form in full presence. The ego needs psychological time to sustain itself. It needs the past to build identity out of memory and story. It needs the future to project itself forward through goals, fears, and desires. I will be happy when I achieve this. I am who I am because of what happened to me. Notice both of these statements pull you out of the present moment and root your sense of self in something that is not actually here, not actually now. The past is a memory occurring now. The future is an imagination occurring now. Both are thought forms arising in this moment, but the ego treats them as more real, more substantial than the actual present moment itself. True self, by contrast, has no need of time. It does not require a personal history to justify its existence, nor a future goal to feel complete. It simply is fully right here. This is why presence feels so different from the ego's constant seeking. Presence is not seeking anything. It is not trying to become more or better or safer or more secure. It rests in what is, exactly as it is, without needing thought to validate or interpret it first. So practically speaking, how do you tell the difference in your actual daily life between when you are operating from ego and when you are operating from your true nature? Here are some signs of ego, and I invite you to observe these gently in yourself, not with self-judgment, because self-judgment is itself just another activity of the ego, a subtler one, criticizing the bad ego self. Simply observe with a kind of quiet curiosity. Notice when you feel a compulsive need to be right in a conversation, even about something trivial. Notice when you feel diminished by someone else's success or inflated by their failure. Notice when your peace of mind depends entirely on external circumstances going a certain way. This is ego, because the true self's peace does not fluctuate with circumstance. Notice when you are replaying an old grievance, keeping a resentment alive, almost enjoying the righteous anger of it. Notice when you find yourself needing others to see you a certain way, needing recognition, needing your opinions validated. All of these are activities of ego, and none of them, by the way, make you a bad person. They make you human, and they make you, like almost everyone else on this planet, partially unconscious, identified with thought without knowing it. Now, the signs of true self are quieter, and this is precisely why they are so often overlooked. True self shows up as a simple background sense of okayness, even in the middle of difficulty, even when the external situation is not okay. It shows up as the capacity to listen to another person without immediately planning your response, without needing to insert your own story. It shows up as the ability to be with what is a delay, a disappointment, a loss, without an intense inner struggle against it, Without the layer of extra suffering the mind adds on top of the situation through resistance. Pain is sometimes unavoidable in life, but suffering, the mental and emotional torment we add through non-acceptance, through the story of this shouldn't be happening, that is optional, and it belongs entirely to the domain of ego. One of the most direct ways to touch your true self right now as you listen to this is simply to ask yourself, is there awareness here right now? Don't answer with a thought. Just feel the answer directly. Yes, there is awareness present right now, aware of these words, aware of the room you're in, aware of the sensations in your body. This awareness, is it young or old? Is it male or female? Does it have an opinion, a nationality, a history? No, it is simply present prior to all of that. This awareness is far closer to who you really are than any thought, memory, or self-image could ever be. The ego is the content. You are the awareness in which the content appears. I want to say something important here, because this teaching is sometimes misunderstood. Recognizing the ego is not about destroying it, hating it, or engaging in a war against yourself. That approach would simply be the ego fighting itself. And the ego, remarkably, can survive and even strengthen through spiritual battle, through the story of I'm working hard to overcome my ego, which becomes just another achievement for the ego to claim. Instead, the invitation is much simpler and much gentler. It is to bring awareness to the ego when it is active, simply to notice, thought is happening, a story is being told, a reaction is arising. The moment you notice this, something remarkable happens. You are, in that very moment, no longer completely identified with it. There is a slight but crucial distance, and in that distance, however small, your true self, your awareness, is already shining through. It doesn't need to defeat the ego, it only needs to notice it. This is the practice, if we can even call it a practice, because it is less about doing and more about a shift in where your attention rests. Throughout your day, simply notice the voice in your head. Notice the running commentary. Notice when you get pulled into a story of past or future, into a reaction, into a need to defend or prove or compare. You don't need to stop the thought. You don't need to suppress it. Just notice it, the way you might notice a cloud passing in the sky. And ask gently, who is aware of this thought? That awareness that is you, not the content. The awareness. Over time, as this noticing becomes more natural, you will find that the ego's grip loosens not through force, but through the simple power of consistent presence. Situations that once would have triggered hours of inner turmoil will pass through you more lightly. Old patterns of comparison and grievance will still arise. The ego rarely disappears completely, but they will be recognized more quickly, held more lightly, seen for what they are, temporary mental weather passing through the vast, unchanging sky of your true nature. So the difference, ultimately, between ego and true self is not a difference of two different selves fighting for dominance. It is the difference between identification and awareness. Ego is what happens when awareness forgets itself and becomes lost in thought, believing itself to be the thinker, the story, the role, the history, True self is simply awareness, remembering itself, recognizing that it was always here, prior to every thought, watching, present, at peace, untouched by the passing content of the mind. You do not need to become someone new to find your true self. You only need to stop, even for a moment, and notice who is aware right now. That noticing itself, that is the doorway. Walk through it again and again, and you will find that what you were seeking was never absent. It was only obscured for a while by the noise of thought mistaking itself for you.